Chapter 1599, Kingdom Fortress, 2. The stern-looking Supreme League King was sitting on his throne in the huge palace. The hall was flanked with dozens of tall armored men wearing cloaks. Enchanting followed the vice-general, who immediately handed General Mark's letter to the king. The king swiftly read through it before slowly raising his eyes to look at the unusually petite young girl standing in the middle of the hall. "Your Tang." "Yes, Your Majesty," replied Enchanting. The king nodded slightly. "Mark's letter says that you displayed extraordinary skill when the Allied forces suddenly attacked. You helped to force the Allied troops to retreat." The Supreme League Kingdom had not received news of the Allied forces' sudden attack. Mark's city was remote, but was one of Supreme League Kingdom's crucial passes. The king had personally sent Mark to hold the pass. If the Allied forces' scheme had succeeded, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Fortunately, the danger had been averted, otherwise, the Supreme League Kingdom would be hard-pressed on all sides. As the king spoke, the dozens of armored men flanking the hall glanced blankly at Enchanting. They did not think much of Mark's praises of Enchanting. After the king finished speaking, he beckoned to a nearby servant. A moment later, the servant respectfully walked over with a tray. The group of men, who had not paid much attention to Enchanting's arrival, now looked surprised when they saw what was on the tray. A gray badge carved with the emblem of an eagle lay quietly on the tray. Their expressions stiffened when they saw the emblem, but they could not express any other emotions in front of the king. "You have lent your strength to the Supreme League Kingdom. As the king of the Supreme League Kingdom, I will now make you a Kingdom Knight. I hope that you will contribute greatly to the kingdom in the future." The king spoke slowly as he glanced at the badge on the tray. In his letter, Mark had highly commended Enchanting for her role in the battle. But the king only saw a young girl before him. She did not seem like a valiant and powerful figure. Even so, her contributions alone justified Enchanting receiving some kind of title. Gifting the title of a Kingdom Knight was the way in which the Supreme League Kingdom recognized powerful knights. It represented strength and loyalty and, more importantly, was a status symbol. A person who became a Kingdom Knight could remain by the king's side to guard him. A Kingdom Knight was the highest status symbol among the knights. The eagle badge in the tray was the emblem of the Kingdom Knights. The dozens of armored men in the hall all wore identical eagle badges on their chests. It was an honor they were proud of. Yet now, the king was giving it to this skinny young girl. The moment the king presented her with the badge, the faces of the Kingdom Knights contorted. Kingdom Knight. Enchanting was not familiar with this world's terms. However, as long as she was allowed to participate in battles, she was happy to accept it. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Enchanting bowed slowly. The king nodded, satisfied. The Supreme League Kingdom was currently in a precarious situation. They needed powerful figures who could boost morale. Chapter 1600, Kingdom Fortress, 3. The king was not concerned about Enchanting's abilities. He gave her the title of Kingdom Knight firstly because she had made a contribution to the war, and secondly to motivate other warriors in the kingdom. This signaled to them that if they were willing to contribute their strength to the kingdom would reward their loyalty. The king gestured for Enchanting to pin the Kingdom Knight badge on herself. When she pinned on the badge, her keen senses perceived the unhappy looks from the other Kingdom Knights. "All right, you may leave. If you need anything, you can discuss it with the others." After the king finished dealing with this matter, his focus returned to the battlefield before him. Enchanting and the vice-general exited the hall. The other Kingdom Knights also left the hall. "Knight Tang, General Mark would be delighted to know that you've become a Kingdom Knight," the vice-general said to Enchanting with a smile. Enchanting laughed. "It's all thanks to General Mark that I had an opportunity to serve the kingdom." The vice-general was about to say something when a slightly mocking voice suddenly rang in their ears. Serve the kingdom. Knight Tang says it so casually. The voice was now clearly dripping with sarcasm. Tang raised her head slightly and saw that the kingdom knights who were in the hall earlier were now blocking their way. Each one of the dozen knights was tall and imposing. Under the weight of their armor, they looked even more impressive. Compared to their tall physiques, the petite Tang looked to be no more than a teenager. She did not even come up to their chests. Knight Tang, how old are you? 14. A golden-haired, blue-eyed kingdom knight dismissively gave her the once-over. His eyes were filled with disdain. Looking at your size, I bet you can't even handle a sword. How can you speak of serving the kingdom on the battlefield? Please, your words are too harsh. A brown-haired rider shook his head in disagreement. Tang is still young. How can she enter the battlefield? She can remain in the fortress with the cooks to prepare our meals so that we have more strength to kill on the battlefield. Isn't that also a way of serving the kingdom? The brown-haired knight seemed to be speaking up for Tang, but his words were even more jarring. When they were in the hall just now, they were incredulous when they saw the king making Tang a kingdom knight. Did people know what a kingdom knight was? It was the ultimate symbol of knighthood. These men who had become kingdom knights were proud of their titles. They were an example to all knights. They had absolute power. They had acquired the much-coveted title of Kingdom Knight after loyally serving the kingdom for many years, battling enemies with all their might, and making numerous contributions. But now, this weak young girl had actually acquired the same title. This was a huge insult to them. Tang's existence besmirched the title of Kingdom Knight. Tang looked expressionlessly at the Kingdom Knights, whose eyes were filled with hostility. She could clearly sense the displeasure radiating from them. This sensation was already present in the hall. 1601 Kingdom Knights 1. The Vice-General was displeased when he heard the Kingdom Knights mocking her. However, with his lowly status, he could not quarrel with the Kingdom Knights, so he had no choice but to respond humbly. Say, Toby, don't you think she looks rather weird? She doesn't look like us and has black hair and those black eyes. Why do I feel she looks like the black witches in stories? Another Kingdom Knight said jeeringly as he sized up Tang. Ah. If she's really a black witch, then she might be useful. But not every black-haired and dark-eyed girl is a black witch. As far as I know, black witches are all very tall, not like this short and skinny fellow, Toby said mockingly. When the king was talking to Tang in the Great Hall, they had heard some of what Tang had done in the border town. However, they felt that she had not done anything to deserve such a great reward. Tang being made a kingdom knight would lower the status of the kingdom knights in the hearts of the people. If word got out, they would all be associated with Tang, and the title of kingdom knights would become a laughingstock among the people. At that moment, the bugle call signaling a battle suddenly sounded. The group of discontented kingdom knights heard the bugle call, and their expressions changed. They immediately put on their helmets and dashed towards the battlefield. Tang was about to follow them, but before she had advanced a few steps, the brown-haired knight blocked her way. You have no right to enter the battlefield if you do not receive an appointment from the king. Tang frowned slightly. The knight laughed coldly. There's no need to pretend to be brave. You must be inwardly rejoicing that you don't need to enter the blood-soaked battlefield. You should be happily hiding under your blankets and laughing to yourself. Be a good girl and go prepare some food for us. Leave the battle to the real knights on the battlefield. It's not a place for a little girl like you to play house. I guess if she really entered the battlefield, she'd be so frightened she'd burst into tears. The knights roared with laughter as they left. They made no attempt to hide their disdain for Tang. Tang remained in the same spot. She coldly watched the knight stride away. The vice-general, who was watching from the sidelines, was very worried. He anxiously watched Enchanting's profile and was afraid that she would be offended by the snide remarks. Enchanting had just been made a kingdom knight, but these kingdom knights had been fighting for many years and were extremely skilled. The vice-general felt that if Enchanting had any disagreement with them, she would probably be at a severe disadvantage. Knight Tang? The vice-general asked tentatively. Enchanting calmly looked at him and said, I cannot enter the battlefield without the king's order. Yes, yes, the vice-general nodded. But the explosion of rage that the vice-general anticipated never appeared. Enchanting had noted the direction of the fortress exit, and now, she turned and walked towards it by herself. The vice-general was stunned when he saw that Enchanting was not angry. He immediately followed her. Fuck, those people are really annoying. The little white tiger, who was cuddled in Enchanting's arms, could not help but mutter. Ignore them, Enchanting said calmly. She was here to complete the mission that the god of nature had given to her, not to bluster and swagger around with the others. If they could make her angry with just a few words, then the 300 years she lived in her past life were all in vain. Chapter 1602, Kingdom Knights, 2, also. The god of nature was floating behind her. He had stopped Enchanting when she was about to strike the Supreme League Kingdom people in that city. If Enchanting guessed correctly, the god of nature did not approve of her attacking the people in this kingdom. She did not want to fail her mission because of a few inconsequential people. The spirit energy in this world was not very rich. If Enchanting cultivated here, it would not have any great effect. Her cultivation speed would be about the same as that in the Gong Valley of Taiyuan Valley, but a little slower. What Enchanting really wanted was to exchange the points gained in the one-star constellation for a reward that could increase her powers. Enchanting did not waste any time. After returning to her room, she immediately sat cross-legged to cultivate. She would grasp every single chance to improve her abilities. The roaring sounds from the battlefield were carried by the wind into the fortress. As the minutes ticked by, Enchanting sensed the energy in her body changing. Although the change was slow, it was a unique sensation. Enchanting vaguely sensed that in the world of constellations, not only could she use the spirit energy in the various worlds to speed up her cultivation, but the energy in her body seemed to become richer while she was cultivating. Although it was not a tremendous change, it caused a continuous qualitative transformation. If the qualitative transformation of the energy in her body reached a certain stage, even if she was only at the first heaven of the heavenly venerate realm, she could easily beat opponents who were in a higher cultivation realm. Enchanting herself was unsure when this qualitative transformation would reach that stage. Day sank into night. The intense battle only ended late at night. The soldiers who had fought hard to press back the enemy now returned to the fortress. The kingdom knights who had been fighting hard all day also returned. After a day of intense battle, they were even more irritated with Enchanting, who had somehow become a kingdom knight for no reason. Their titles were hard-won, obtained by fighting one battle after another. But it was different for her. In the following days, the allied forces attacked continually. As one battle followed another, the king seemed to have completely forgotten about Enchanting's existence. He did not issue any orders for her to join the battle. All this made the kingdom knights even unhappier about Enchanting. While they were putting their lives on the line to fight the enemy, this girl was resting safely behind the fortress walls, enjoying their protection. But her title was the same as theirs. I'm fed up with that parasite. What does she do besides stay in her room and enjoy the privileges of being a kingdom knight? Even the grooms in the stable are more useful than her. A few discontented kingdom knights charged towards Enchanting's room. After a few days of tempering, the energy in Enchanting's body had become even richer. The spirit energy in the 2-star constellation world was about the same as that of the 1-star constellation, but it was many times better at tempering her inner energy. Enchanting was delighted by this discovery. Before Enchanting could calm down from this discovery, someone violently kicked her room door open. The Kingdom Knights, whom Enchanting had met in the Great Hall, appeared at her door. The few who had mocked her were all present. At that moment, their eyes were filled with undisguised hatred. Chapter 1603, Kingdom Knights, 3, Tang, you really know how to enjoy yourself, huh? Do you feel safe hiding here? The blonde knight Toby looked mockingly at Enchanting, who was in her room. Get out, Enchanting said expressionlessly. She could ignore their ignorant jabs, but she did not like others invading her personal space. Ah, the little lamb has a temper. Toby laughed coldly. He completely ignored Enchanting's order. Tang, since you are now a Kingdom Knight, shouldn't you participate in the Kingdom Knights training? Another Kingdom Knight was up to no good. Enchanting stood up. Where? What? Toby and the others evidently did not understand Enchanting's words. Where is the training? Asked Enchanting. Although Enchanting had been cultivating for the past few days, she had asked the Vice-General to petition the king to allow her to join in the battle as soon as possible. However, the king seemed to be ignoring her petition. Enchanting did not know what else to do, so she intended to have a good talk with the king about participating in the battle after she finished cultivating. But this group of arrogant Kingdom Knights had come knocking again. The god of nature had said that she must not casually hurt the citizens of the Supreme League Kingdom, but if she was sparring during a training session, it should not be an issue. For the past few days, they had often sought her out to make trouble. Besides mocking and disparaging her, they had crossed the line by barging into her room today. Enchanting was good-tempered, but she would not permit them to act like that. Toby and the others immediately understood Enchanting's meaning. They exchanged glances and saw scheming looks in each other's eyes. Because they were all Kingdom Knights, they could not find any excuse to teach this parasite a lesson. Now, she had stupidly given them an opening. They must allow her to fully experience the power of a Kingdom Knight. With that, Toby and the others immediately led Enchanting to the court where the Kingdom Knights usually trained. Many Kingdom Knights were already training in the court. The sounds of slaughtering and the clash of weapons could be heard continually. When Enchanting entered the court, the Kingdom Knights who were in the middle of their training simultaneously fixed their gaze on her. Their hands stopped moving. Why is she here? Someone asked with a frown. Enchanting had been in the fortress for many days, but she could not fight without the king's orders. This had made them even more disgruntled. They had never seen Enchanting's shadow cross the court. She had not trained at all. Who knows? Perhaps Toby and the others brought her here. That fellow Toby has brains. I have a bone to pick with this Tang fellow. Does she really think that she's here in the fortress to enjoy herself like some lord's daughter? She doesn't even come for training. How can someone like her be fit to be a Kingdom Knight? What's she doing here? Embarrassing herself. Do you think she can even pick up a weapon with her little arms and legs? A Kingdom Knight coldly glanced at the weapons on display. As Kingdom Knights, they were much stronger than ordinary soldiers. All their weapons were forged by special craftsmen, and just those alone were several times heavier than what ordinary people would use. Chapter 1604, Parasite, 1. Toby and the others led Enchanting to the square. Shooting a knowing look to his friends nearby, he subsequently turned to look at Enchanting and spoke. This is our training grounds. Just as Enchanting looked up, a bolt of light suddenly shot toward her. With a clang, an arrow narrowly grazed past Enchanting's cheek and stuck into a pillar behind her. Ah! Sorry, you're too small. I didn't see you just now. I'm really sorry. A tall and well-built male who wielded a bow seemed to be apologetic toward Enchanting. Although he seemed to be apologizing, there was absolutely no sign of remorse or regret. Instead, his face was full of smiles. Did you see that? That parasite is stunned. She's not even moving an inch. That was really nasty of Joseph. But I like it. Ha ha ha, all the Kingdom Knights guffawed at the scene before them, clearly treating Enchanting as a clown they could make fun of. Toby added on as well. Everyone is focused on their training in the training grounds. Tang, your head's too small, and it'll be very easy for someone to lose sight of you. You must be careful. Otherwise, you have no one to blame if you are accidentally injured. Accidentally injured. The little white tiger in Enchanting's arms gritted its sharp fangs. That arrow was clearly aimed at Enchanting. This group of people simply had ill intentions when they called Enchanting to the square. Tang really hasn't grown up. She's carrying a little animal wherever she goes. Toby and the others laid their eyes on the little white tiger in Enchanting's arms. In this world where white tigers did not exist, they instinctively assumed it to be a strange-looking big cat. A petite girl carried a big cat around wherever she went. How was this what a Kingdom Knight should look like? If more people saw Enchanting, the Kingdom Knight title would be tarnished by her. As that thought surfaced in everyone's minds, their dissatisfaction toward Enchanting intensified. Enchanting was utterly expressionless as she watched the scene before her. Toby and the rest thought that Enchanting was dumbstruck and were very pleased with this outcome. They wanted to let her know how powerful the Kingdom Knights were and that she was not worthy of having such a title. Tang, you haven't been to training these few days. Why don't I spar with you as a warm-up? Toby asked while harboring evil intentions. The Kingdom Knights in the surrounding cheered. Toby, you must go easy on her. Otherwise, this little fellow's bones will be crushed by your punch. Ha, Toby, why must you make things difficult for Tang? Didn't you see that she's about to cry from the shock? Enchanting, who was about to cry from the shock, looked at the sarcastic faces around her. Without a word, she placed the little white tiger down and turned to look at Toby. How do you want to spar? Toby, Tang has already agreed to it. You must guide her well. Everyone erupted into laughter as in their eyes, Enchanting was just courting death. They could make use of this opportunity to teach this parasite a lesson. Toby's smile was exceptionally mean as he looked at Enchanting. Anything. However, Tang, you know that we use real weapons and are very serious when we train. Having some accidental injuries will be unavoidable. Chapter 1605, Parasite 2. Everyone's eyes were fixed on both Toby and Enchanting at this instant as they waited for Toby to teach the parasite a lesson. They wanted to show her the powers of a true Kingdom Knight and let her know that she was simply unworthy of the same title. Toby sized up Enchanting nonchalantly. His eyes were full of contempt as he picked up his spear and made a few strokes in front of Enchanting. In the next second, Toby's strokes became extremely fast. Every move was aimed at Enchanting, yet all of these imposing and frightening moves coincidentally missed her body. Even if one was not pierced by it, the sight of a spear striking at someone numerous times was already terrifying enough. Yet, Enchanting remained rooted to the ground as she glanced at those attacks emotionlessly. The surrounding Kingdom Knights erupted in laughter when they saw that Enchanting did not move. Toby, go easy on her. Don't you see that she has already turned white in fear? How pitiful. Tang probably does not dare to move at all now, right? The surrounding Kingdom Knights looked at Enchanting scornfully. How dare she carry the Kingdom Knight title with such timidity? If she were really sent to the battlefield, she would just pee in her pants out of fear, wouldn't she? With a pleased expression, Toby looked at Enchanting and said, "We go through such training every day. Tang, since you have already become a kingdom knight, you must come here every day and train with us." They would take great care of this sheltered girl every day and teach her proper kingdom knight bearing. By then, even if they did not initiate it, Enchanting would make a request to the king for her to leave due to the inability to withstand such training. Surrounded by the mockery, Enchanting remained emotionless, however. Her eyes passed by each scornful face and eventually landed on Toby. "Can we start now?" Toby raised a brow. "Of course. You can surrender any time when you can't stand it." Enchanting did not say a word. While facing his surrounding comrades, Toby shrugged before lifting his spear in the air as though to display his strength. Afterward, he looked at Enchanting indifferently and said, "I'm going to start, okay?" He sounded like he was teasing an immature child. The moment he finished his sentence, Toby directly struck at Enchanting with his spear. Enchanting remained motionless, and it was as though she did not notice Toby's attack at all. To everyone else, Enchanting was dumbstruck and did not even have the courage to flee. But just as Toby's spear was about to stab into Enchanting's shoulder, Enchanting suddenly raised her right hand and grabbed the spearhead. In just a moment, Toby's move seemed to come to a standstill as he maintained his attacking stance without moving. Toby was slightly taken aback, but the clueless kingdom knights around him continued to guffaw. "Toby, isn't it too obvious that you went easy on her?" However, only Toby himself knew what was going on. His spear seemed to be stuck in a huge mountain, and he could not move it no matter how much strength he put in. "What is going on?" Toby almost used all his strength, his face was flushed, and his veins were about to pop. But it was still useless. Chapter 1606, Parasite 3. Enchanting looked up slightly and saw a popping vein on Toby's forehead. Then, she flipped her hand that was grabbing the spear and lifted it with force. "Arr!" With a surprised shout, Toby was lifted up entirely with his spear, and before he could react in time, Enchanting abruptly released her grip on the spear. Boom! A loud and deep crash echoed in the surroundings, and Toby crashed to the ground violently as his head buzzed. The loud sound shattered the laughter in the surroundings. Looks of surprise appeared on everyone's faces as they looked at Toby, who was grimacing in pain. What happened? Joseph and the others exchanged a look. Why did they not understand the situation before them anymore? To Toby, it felt as if his organs were shattered as he turned pale from the pain. He slowly looked up in shock at Enchanting, who remained at the same spot. "Toby, what's with you? Did you not eat today? You can't even defeat a little girl." The kingdom knights who were waiting to see Enchanting make a joke out of herself were evidently displeased. They would never believe that Toby was really thrown to the ground by such a frail and weak-looking girl. Apart from going easy on her, they could not think of any other possibility. The ridicule of his comrades rang in his ears, causing him to turn pale immediately. Suddenly, he stood up and forcefully swung his fist toward Enchanting's head with a growl. "Damn it! How dare this parasite embarrass me in front of everyone?" Enchanting did not avoid Toby's punch and instead met his fist straight on with hers. The instant the two fists collided, Toby's face distorted in pain. There was a sharp and crisp sound as a large force sent Toby flying away. "Ah!" Toby grabbed onto his fist as he retreated a distance. Dripping in cold sweat, his distorted palm hung beside his body, and it was evident that his bones were crushed. However, Enchanting's fist seemed completely unharmed, fair, clean, and perfect as before. Everyone at the scene was stunned. If they felt that the previous scene happened because Toby went easy on her, then now, with both fists meeting each other, Toba's fist was fractured from the impact while Yi Qingtang's was completely intact. This. My hand. Ah. Clutching his distorted hand, Toby was drenched in cold sweat from the excruciating pain, which almost drove him berserk. Joseph and the rest returned to their senses from Toba's cries, and 2 Kingdom Knights hurriedly brought the injured Toby to receive medical attention. Tang, you were too ruthless. Do you want to kill Toby? The Kingdom Knights immediately berated Yi Qingtang loudly when they saw their longtime comrade injured. Toby practiced with you out of kindness, but you were evil enough to attack him so fiercely. Yi Qingtang glanced at the Kingdom Knights and felt that they were more than ridiculous. They acknowledged Toby and felt that she was at fault for injuring Toby, but if the injured one was her, they probably would humiliate and ridicule her endlessly. They were clearly the ones who wanted to teach her a lesson first, but now that their man was being taught a lesson instead, they wanted to play the blame game. Chapter 1607, Fight the War. 1. Injuries are inevitable in sparring. Isn't this what you all said? Yi Qingtang asked. Toby needs to go to the battlefield to kill enemies, but you injured him. Do you think everyone is as shameless as you to hide in the fortress for safety? They did not expect Yi Qingtang to injure Toby at all. Originally, Yi Qingtang would have been the injured one. However, the scene that played out was beyond their expectations. Seeing their own brother being injured while the parasite was still quibbling, the Kingdom Knights felt a strong sense of dissatisfaction. Just as they decided to continue pestering Yi Qingtang over this matter, the assembly horns suddenly rang, and a group of guards hurried over to notify everyone that the king was gathering all the Kingdom Knights in the hall in preparation for war. Since the king's orders could not be defied, everyone immediately suppressed their anger and hurried to the main hall. Yi Qingtang carried the little white tiger and followed as well. What the fuck? I thought that I'd seen many shameless people already, but it turns out that I'm still so ignorant. How are they shameless? They're simply barefaced and brazen. Their own man couldn't defeat you, and they're even blaming it on you. The little white tiger witnessed the entire scene and was utterly shocked by the behavior of the group of Kingdom Knights. They are displeased with me, so whatever I do is naturally wrong. Yi Qingtang smiled faintly. She did not put this incident to heart, and she attacked today only to let them know that she was no weak figure. As for whether they liked her or not, who cares? Dozens of Kingdom Knights within the fortress scurried to the hall where the king assembled them at. The king's brows were tightly locked together as he looked gravely at the sand table before him. Then, he looked at the Kingdom Knights, the elites of their Supreme League Kingdom, in the hall. The Allied forces assembled an army of 500,000 outside our fortress. This time, the glorious Lion Knights are the vanguard. According to the information from our scouts, there are a few black witches concealed in the glorious Lion Knights troop. Apart from this, they also prepared 20 siege engines, and it seems that they are going to launch a fierce attack on our fortress. The king spoke slowly. Silence fell over the hall in a moment. When Yi Qingtang heard the glorious Lion Knights and Black Witches, she faintly guessed why the allied forces that were gathered outside the town suddenly withdrew their troops. She reckoned that they were urgently deployed to the front lines. The allied forces are fully prepared this time. I need you all to buy sufficient time, and I will not deploy many troops. Your goal is only to buy time. Understood. The war from the previous day had just ended, and the fortress' internal forces had yet to completely recover. They must buy enough time and wait for reinforcements to arrive. Is any one of you confident to lead the troops to an enemy retreat? The king scanned the knights at the scene. A few Kingdom Knights were about to reply, but Joseph suddenly shot them a look before stepping forward. Your Majesty, I have a suitable candidate. Who? The king said. Knight Tang, Joseph said emotionlessly, but he discreetly glanced at Yi Qingtang, who was at the back of the crowd. Chapter 1608, Fight the War. 2. The king was dumbfounded for a moment, but he recalled the new kingdom knight he conferred some time ago. The reason he granted Yi Qingtang the kingdom knight title was not because he acknowledged Yi Qingtang's skills but to boost the army morale. Yet, Joseph suddenly suggested letting Yi Qingtang fight the war and lead the army, and this caused the emperor to frown slightly. Joseph and the others had been dissatisfied with Yi Qingtang for a long time. Adding the fact that she just injured their fellow brother Toby, right now, they could not wait to send Yi Qingtang onto a battlefield with thousands of enemy forces and let her fend for herself. If the king required them to win against the allied forces, they would not joke about such a matter, but if it was only to buy time, there was nothing wrong with sending Yi Qingtang. Wasn't the so-called buying time just using lives to exchange for time? If the outcome was death, of course, the most suitable choice was to sacrifice the most useless parasite. The king hesitated as well. He currently needed some way to endure the first wave of attack, and they would only fight it out with the allied forces after the reinforcements arrived and joined in the war a while later. Your Majesty, we just sparred with Yi Qingtang on the field earlier on, and Tang is very skilled. I believe she came to the fortress and became a kingdom knight to attain glory for the kingdom. Your Majesty, why don't you give Tang a chance and let her display her ambition? In order to screw Yi Qingtang badly, Joseph recommended her strongly without scruples of going against his heart to praise her skills. The other kingdom knights shared the same thoughts and agreed that Yi Qingtang was the most suitable candidate for this war without Joseph having to tell them anything. The little white tiger made a gagging action when it heard this group of people echoing off each other. They're really going all out to screw you this time. Yi Qingtang did not utter a word. After remaining silent for a while, the king suddenly said, Tang, are you confident you can fight this war? Everyone at the scene was very clear that buying time was basically throwing one's life away. In order to retain their strength, it was impossible to deploy too many forces as the king naturally also wished to retain his elite forces. The moment the king spoke, everyone's eyes landed on Yi Qingtang, and Joseph and the others looked at her in a satirical manner. Yi Qingtang walked forward slowly under everyone's watch. Your Majesty, I am willing to fight the war. Smiles filled Joseph's eyes instantly. Very well. The king nodded in satisfaction and immediately deployed 10,000 soldiers to fight along Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang received the order and made the necessary preparations at once. Meanwhile, Joseph and the rest left the hall in smiles as they looked at Yi Qingtang like she was a dead person. She's so bold to accept it. Is she really treating fighting a war as playing house? She has not even been on a battlefield before. What does she know? Over the past few days, she hid behind us and enjoyed herself for a long time. It's time for her to know the cruelty of war. 10,000 against 500,000. I think her entire corpse won't even be found. Who cares how she dies? Just a while longer, and the reinforcements will arrive. By then, we will lead the troops and fight our way out. The kingdom knight chatted and roared with laughter. In their eyes, Yi Qingtang was just an ignorant fool, and leaving the city to fight the war now was just welcoming death. Chapter 1609, Fight the War. 3. All of them were looking forward to the disappearance of this parasite. However, they did not know that what they did was far from throwing Yi Qingtang into a pit of fire, rather, they were providing her some timely help. During this period of time, Yi Qingtang had been troubling over the absence of a chance to go to war, but these knights joined forces to solve her troubles. Ultimately, Yi Qingtang really wanted to thank their kindness. Yi Qingtang headed to prepare immediately after receiving the orders while the 10,000 soldiers who were called to fight the war, as though they heard the death knell, had haggard expressions and seemed to be filled with despair. Any soldier who had fought in a war before knew what kind of hopeless situation they were going to face should they fight with such a disparity in numbers. Furthermore, when they saw that their leading kingdom knight was actually a petite teenage girl, their despair intensified, and they almost broke down. The powerful Joseph and other knights were not even fighting this war, yet a little kingdom knight, who God knows popped out from where, was sent instead. If this was not sending them to die, what was? The war had not even begun, but the 10,000 soldiers of the Supreme League Kingdom already had a hunch of their deaths and were vaguely aware that they would become sacrifices in the kingdom's war. How old is that whatever Knight Tang? Does she know what a war is? Oh God! We are really going to die this time. The soldiers grieved incessantly. Yet, Enchanting, who got onto a horse, was completely unaware, and her eyes shone as though she was looking forward to it greatly. Her behavior caused the soldiers to sigh even more deeply. Indeed, she knew nothing. Otherwise, how could she be this relaxed in the face of such a hopeless situation? 1,000 meters away from the kingdom's fortress, the Allied forces' army of 500,000 was waiting to take action with their accumulated strength. Before the fortress gate was opened, the cheers of the Allied forces outside rang loudly like roaring thunder, sending chills down the spines of the 10,000 soldiers who could not even hold their weapons without trembling. Joseph and the rest had already stood at the city wall of the fortress a long time ago, and they were alarmed by the sight of the 500,000 soldiers. That is the war flag of the glorious Lion Knights. Joseph frowned instinctively when he saw a war flag of a fierce lion in the enemy troops. There's going to be a good show. With the glorious Lion Knights in the war, Tang probably will not even last an hour with those 10,000 soldiers, said another kingdom knight. His Majesty has already made backup plans. If there isn't enough time, another troop will replace them, Joseph said. Evidently, no one treated the troop of 10,000 soldiers seriously, and they all the more did not treat Enchanting seriously either. They felt that Enchanting was a complete good-for-nothing who would not even be capable of buying time. The horn rang suddenly, and the gate of the kingdom's fortress opened. Equipped with armor, Enchanting took the lead and charged out of the fortress on a horse. Meanwhile, the 10,000 soldiers behind her felt their legs wobble as fear engulfed them instantly after seeing the Allied forces' 500,000 men troop. This was it. They were really dead this time. Such few of them were not even enough to be an appetizer for the Allied forces. A 50 times difference in military strength. Apart from God, who else could win such a war? After the 10,000 people exited the fortress, the gate was shut instantly, completely crushing their last hope of escaping. Chapter 16:10. Don't move if you're scared. 1. Of course, the Allied forces saw the 10,000 soldiers emerging from the kingdom fortress. The Allied forces roared with laughter when they saw their pathetic military strength. 10,000 men. Is the Supreme League Kingdom joking? There's so few of them that there's probably not enough for us to sink our teeth into. Ha, guess what I saw? Look at that pathetic little girl. Don't tell me she's the general the Supreme League Kingdom sent. The Supreme League Kingdom must really be short of people if they're sending a little fellow like that out to die. A few sharp-eyed knights of the glorious lion saw Enchanting astride her tall horse. They burst out laughing when they saw Enchanting's appearance. How old is she? Is she even 14 years old? She's probably shorter than the spear I'm holding. How can someone like that lead troops to war? The Supreme League Kingdom isn't taking us seriously. Brothers, let's give them a fright. The next moment, the 500,000-strong troop let out a deafening roar. It was as if the entire earth shook. As they roared, they raised their weapons, which glittered blindingly in the sunshine, and clustered densely together in a line. It was a hair-raising sight. The 10,000 soldiers from the Supreme League Kingdom were terrified by this sight. They knew they had been sent to die, but they were unable to suppress their terror of death. Enchanting glanced at the troops behind her, who were quivering with fear. Her face was completely devoid of expression. Tang, this is your first time participating in a battle. Don't embarrass our Supreme League Kingdom. Joseph yelled maliciously from the fortress wall. He could not wait to see Enchanting wet herself with terror. Many of the kingdom knights laughed at Joseph's remarks. But the 10,000 soldiers despaired when they heard that this was Enchanting's first time participating in a battle. They actually sent someone who has never fought in a battle before. We really were sent here to die. And we have to die with her. The soldiers, who initially still had some fighting spirit, completely lost their morale when they learned that their leader had not even participated in a battle before. This proved that they had been sent here to die. Enchanting ignored the jeers. She turned her head slightly and looked at her despondent soldiers. Are you scared? The soldiers that were prepared to die had no respect for Enchanting. Anyway, they were doomed. Who cared if she was a kingdom knight or not? Who wouldn't be scared? It's 10,000 against 50,000. How can we win? We've been sent here to die. Sir Knight, you're so powerful. Why don't you advance? They all sneered. Enchanting's lips slowly curved in a smile. If you're scared, just stay here and don't move. The soldiers were bewildered by Enchanting's words. They wondered if this Knight Tang was crazy. She will allow us to stay here without moving. Stay here and wait to be captured and killed. But before the soldiers could react, Enchanting suddenly spurred her horse forward and charged towards the allied forces by herself. The soldiers were all astonished. Is this Knight Tang an idiot? What is she thinking? Is she in a hurry to die? At that moment, all the Supreme League Kingdom soldiers were shocked. When the allied forces saw Enchanting charging at them single-handedly, they were startled, and then burst into uproarious laughter. Chapter 16:11. Don't move if you're scared. 2. What the hell is the Supreme League Kingdom doing? Sending this little devil out to die. Could they be surrendering? The allied forces roared with laughter. They found the scene before them hilarious. The Knights of the Glorious Lions swept a patronizing look at Enchanting. They crossed their arms and said to the troop next to them, "Don't waste time. Kill her." No matter what the Supreme League Kingdom had up its sleeve, they had no time to waste on this girl. Their goal was to capture the Supreme League Kingdom's fortress. With that, 100 allied soldiers rode out, yelling as they charged at Enchanting. They carried long spears and spurred their horses as they galloped forward swiftly. Enchanting's face remained expressionless when she saw the approaching cavalry. She dismounted to meet the allied forces that were galloping towards her. The 10,000 Supreme League Kingdom soldiers who were standing outside the fortress watched as the 100 riders charged at Enchanting. The spear points glittered with cold light. At the next moment, they would pierce Enchanting's frail body. Everyone subconsciously shut their eyes. Do you want to die? The allied forces were right in front of Enchanting. The dozens of cavalry lifted their spears in unison and threw them forcefully at Enchanting. Clank, 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 clank. The spear points made contact with Enchanting without harming her. It was as if all the spears had hit tough meteoric iron, and a clear ringing sound could be heard. Enchanting stood there without moving an inch. It was as if the sharp spears pinned to her body were dozens of feathers. What's going on? The allied forces' troops were stunned. They looked at the spears in their hands and thrust them forward with all their might, but they could not penetrate Enchanting's skin at all. It was as if they had hit a rock. At that moment, even the Supreme League Kingdom soldiers, who could not bear to watch what would have been a gruesome death, were completely shocked, not to mention the allied forces. They saw dozens of spears thrust at Enchanting, yet why did Enchanting seem completely unharmed? On the city wall, Joseph and the other kingdom knight were also shaken by this sight. Is Tang wearing armor? Nonsense. What kind of armor can withstand the spears of the glorious Lion Knights? The spears of the glorious Lion Knights were all specially forged. It was no exaggeration to say that they could cut through metal like paper. They could even easily cut through a thick steel plate. Could this Yi Qingtang's body be harder than a steel plate? While everyone was in a state of shock, Yi Qingtang calmly glanced at the dozens of spearheads pressing against her. The next moment, she suddenly lifted her hand and swept at the spears. A metallic explosion instantly rang out. The specially forged spears all broke and clattered to the ground as she waved her sleeve. Before the allied forces could recover their wits, Yi Qingtang had already strode forward. Her slender hands batted at an allied soldier in the front as if shooing a fly away. Ah ah! The moment Yi Qingtang's hands swept past, a wail rang out. Yi Qingtang had sent the allied soldier and his horse flying. The other allied soldiers had no time to react before Yi Qingtang slowly walked over to them. As her slender arm rose and fell, all the surrounding allied soldiers and their horses were sent flying. Chapter 16:12. Don't move if you're scared. 3. For a moment, the screams of the horses and the wails of the allied soldiers filled the area. They could see allied soldiers being tossed into the air while the warhorses they rode were also flung screaming into the air. Yi Qingtang seemed to move slowly, but by the time the allied forces wanted to act, it was too late. They found themselves behind, flung skywards even before they could prepare themselves to fight. Their faces behind their helmets were filled with surprise and terror. What kind of strength is that? Joseph, who was on the city wall, widened his eyes in disbelief. He had been fighting in the army for so many years, but this was his first time seeing such a simple and barbaric method of fighting. A single slap could send a fully armored glorious lion knight and his steed flying skywards. Even the other kingdom knights had widened their eyes in disbelief, not to mention Joseph. It was as if they were seeing a ghost. One must know that Yi Qingtang was only a petite and frail young girl. If any one of them were put in the same situation, they were certainly not capable of doing the same. The hundreds of allied cavalry were like bales of hay being flung into the sky. When they fell to the ground, they could not move. Behind them, the allied soldiers had grim expressions. The commander looked livid, and it was as if he had eaten something ghastly. Who on earth is she? Why does she have this strange power? I don't know. She looks unfamiliar. I've never seen her before. The allied forces were completely bewildered. They had never met Yi Qingtang before and thought that she had single-handedly charged forward to meet her death. But now it looked like she was a monster. The allied forces commander looked grim. He coldly shouted, "Don't waste time on her. The reinforcements from the Supreme League Kingdom will soon be here. We must attack the fortress before their reinforcements arrive. Archers, shoot. I want to see whether she can survive an attack by my 70,000 archers." A young girl from the Supreme League Kingdom had beaten 100 of their glorious lion knights. He could not stand it. At his order, the 10,000 archers among the allied forces drew their bows. The next moment, a dense shower of arrows shot straight at the slender figure in the center of the battlefield. Yi Qingtang looked at the allied soldiers who had collapsed around her in a moaning heap. With a completely calm face, she suddenly raised her head and looked at the horizon. The arrows were flying towards her as thick as rain, but her lips arched slightly in an imperceptible smile. Yi Qingtang slowly took a step forward. Although it looked like a casual step, the moment her heel touched the ground, a whirlwind abruptly arose. This was the first time she was using the Jiang family's movement techniques. Although it could not compare to the immense power generated when Jiang Yu took a step, to the people in this world, it was savage. The moment the whirlwind swept skywards, the 10,000 arrows were swept straight into the whirlwind. The arrows were torn into pieces by the violent wind, and not one could break through the spinning whirlwind. How is this possible? The commander of the Allied forces widened his eyes. 7,000 arrows had been fragmented in a blink of an eye. What kind of joke was this? Where's the Black Witch? Use your witchcraft to kill her. The commander of the Allied forces looked utterly grim. There were 50,000 soldiers ready just to conquer the kingdom fortress. He certainly would not permit this little devil to affect the army's morale. Chapter 1613, Monster 1. After the order was given, a dozen women in black cloaks emerged from among the troops. They were the Black Witches who had been gathered by the various countries. They possessed terrifying dark arts, and their sole role in this battle was to destroy the enemy. For a while, the Black Witches bowed their heads and chanted an incomprehensible incantation. Large patches of dark clouds slowly gathered in the sky above them. Thunder rumbled loudly as if the earth and sky were about to split. Joseph and the others on the fortress wall saw the thunderclouds slowly gather. Then, they looked at the Black Witches, who were chanting their spells. They could not help but hang grave expressions on their faces. The Allied forces have really mobilized the Black Witches. The Black Witches were an abomination. They obtained powerful dark arts from the devil in exchange for their souls. Once, everyone had tried to destroy them, but now, they were a trump card in the Allied forces' hands. Enchanting, who was in the middle of the whirlwind, cocked her head on one side as she looked at the chanting Black Witches. What now? Enchanting suddenly raised her head and saw the storm clouds that the Black Witches were gathering. A cold light flashed across her eyes, and she instantly exuded endless sheets of black flames. In the wild wind, the black flames flickered like demons, and the whirlwind spread them across the void. The black flames in the void instantly gathered to form a huge black phoenix, which spanned 100 meters. The call of the phoenix cut through the air. The chanting Black Witches raised their eyes in shock at the phoenix's call. When they looked at the phoenix made of black flames covering the sky, all of them looked terrified. The next moment, the black flame phoenix swooped down on the Allied forces' battle lines. As it dived, its huge body seemed to expand. What is that? The commander of the Allied forces widened his eyes in disbelief. He looked at the black flame phoenix diving towards them. It seemed like a nightmare. It was like encountering a demon. An immortal bird. Is that an immortal bird? A Black Witch was so frightened when she saw the black flame phoenix rushing towards them that she forgot to chant. She wrapped her terrified and quivering body under her thick cloak. The legendary immortal bird burnt with unquenchable flames. Shoot that devilish thing down. The commander of the Allied forces shouted hoarsely. The numerous archers shot simultaneously, but the moment the arrows touched the phoenix, they formed sparks that fell straight onto the troops. Everyone who came into contact with the black flames was instantly engulfed by flames. No matter how they rolled or tried to beat it out, they could not extinguish the flames. The black flames spread swiftly like wildfire through the neatly arrayed rows of the 500,000-strong army. Wails rose and fell throughout the Allied camp. As the black flame phoenix dived downward and passed over the area, the entire place was burnt to ashes. At that moment, Joseph and the others who were standing on the city wall goggled at the sight. They stared open-mouthed as the huge black flame phoenix engulfed everything before them and opposite them. They broke into a cold sweat as they watched the scene unfold before their eyes. What on earth is that? What kind of monster has Enchanting summoned? At that moment, the disdain that Joseph and the others had for Enchanting was reduced to ashes by the ferocious black flame phoenix, leaving only terror in their hearts. Chapter 1614, Monster, 2, Fortunately. Fortunately, Tang had not summoned this monster to deal with them. Or else. When they thought of how they had jeered and sneered at Enchanting earlier, Joseph and the others felt cold prickles down their spines. It was as if they had challenged a demon. They wished they could slap themselves. Outside the fortress, the 10,000 demoralized soldiers who were prepared to die were also dumbfounded. They stared as the nearby enemy troops were swallowed by the black flames. They felt as though they were living in a dream. They could not stop rubbing their eyes in disbelief. Previously, they felt that His Majesty the King was forcing them to their doom by sending this young girl who had never been on the battlefield. But they had not thought that. She was not a young girl. She was a monster. The 500,000-strong army was not even able to fight and was simply engulfed by the black flames. Endless moans and screams filled their ears. It was spine-chilling. As the black flames spread, the 500,000-strong army, the glorious lions, and the black witches were all completely reduced to ashes. As the last wail disappeared in the black flames, Enchanting crooked her finger. The black flame phoenix in the horizon and the black flames that covered the ground were instantly drawn back into her fingertips by her power, vanishing without a trace. All that was left on the battlefield was a mountain of ashes. Not even bone fragments remained. The violent wind whooshed past, and the ashes were caught up in the wind, scattering across the spacious battlefield. There were no bodies and no battle. There was no scent of blood. Only the stench of ashes was carried to their nostrils by the wind. On the battlefield, only a single proud figure was left standing in the wind. The Allied forces have been defeated. Have we won? We don't need to die anymore. Someone in the 10,000-strong troop suddenly grasped this crucial point. Amidst the shock, his despair gradually dissipated and was replaced by the wild joy of survival. We've won. Night Tang is awesome. Night Tang is awesome. The 10,000 soldiers who had managed to survive immediately cheered. They were not afraid to fight, but they did not want to be the sacrificial lambs in a doomed situation. If they could survive to fight another day, who would be willing to die? Waves of cheers filled the air. The soldiers who had survived rushed towards Enchanting. In their eyes, she was a hero, and they celebrated by tossing her in the air. But after personally witnessing this young girl's power, their hearts were filled with respect and gratitude. When they recalled how they had reproached Enchanting and mistrusted her, they were so ashamed that they wanted to dig a hole in the ground and burrow into it. I deserve to die. I actually doubted Night Tang's abilities. We were really too ignorant. How could His Majesty the King send us to die so easily? His Majesty must have been fully prepared when he appointed Night Tang to lead the troops. His Majesty the King is wise. Night Tang is awesome. What did they have to fear with a powerful kingdom knight like Enchanting before them? So what if the opposing side had 50 times more soldiers? One must consider that in this battle, Enchanting had single-handedly demolished the 500,000 soldiers of the Allied forces. That was a difference of 500,000 times. Joseph and the others who were on the city wall could not help but gulp when they saw the soldiers cheering for Enchanting. Chapter 1615, Monster, 3. They had allowed Enchanting to fight because they wanted to embarrass her and hoped she would die on the battlefield. But now, as they looked at the Allied forces that were reduced to a pile of ashes, all they could think of was how they could quickly think of a way to mend their relationship with Enchanting. Otherwise, they might also become a heap of ashes. It was not just Joseph and the other Kingdom Knights who were thinking like that. Even the other Supreme League Kingdom soldiers who stood on the city wall to watch the battle were now in inward turmoil. When they saw the 500,000-strong Allied troops, they were prepared to defend the fortress to the death. But no one expected that the Allied forces would be completely exterminated without them even touching the fortress wall. As they looked at Yi Qingtang's figure, the morale of all the soldiers in the Supreme League Kingdom rose. She was so powerful, and she came from their country and was a kingdom knight. An unprecedented sense of security arose in their hearts. At the same time, a door at the other end of the fortress slowly opened. Tens of thousands of Supreme League Kingdom reinforcements had marched through the night to get to the fortress. The commander-in-chief immediately brought them to see the king. "Your Majesty." The commander of the reinforcements bowed to the king. When the king saw the commander of the reinforcements, his eyes flickered. A hint of a smile appeared in his eyes, which had been looking grim for a long time. "You're just in time. The 500,000 soldiers of the Allied forces are outside the fortress. I have already sent men to buy you some time. You must immediately prepare for battle." The king had felt anxious when he sent Yi Qingtang out to fight and buy time. He was worried that Yi Qingtang would die in battle before she had bought enough time and that the Supreme League Kingdom's fortress would face a devastating blow before the reinforcements arrived. But now, there still was no news from the front that Yi Qingtang had lost the battle. This pleased the king. Although he knew that Yi Qingtang and her group were doomed to die in this battle, as long as they could cause sufficient delay and buy the reinforcements enough time, then they would have accomplished their mission perfectly. Of course, if they survived until the reinforcements joined them, the reinforcements might still be able to save some of them. If possible, the king did not wish to sacrifice his troops like that. However, the circumstances forced his hand. "I will go and make preparations. What is the situation at the front? I need to know so I can better prepare for the battle," the commander of the reinforcement said. The king nodded and summoned a soldier to question him about the fighting at the front. "Your Majesty, Knight Tang has achieved a complete victory. She is about to lead her troops back to the fortress." The soldier who arrived with the news looked delighted. "What?" The king, who was about to reorganize his troops and strike back at the Allied forces, was stunned. "Knight Tang achieved a complete victory. What do you mean by that?" "Knight Tang won. She defeated the Allied forces," the soldier said. For the first time, the king felt as if he did not understand what he heard. The commander of the reinforcements was also bewildered. When he received the news, he knew that the kingdom fortress was in a precarious situation, which was why he had mustered his troops and hurried here as soon as possible. One must know that with the kingdom fortress' current military strength, they could not possibly hold out against the 500,000 soldiers of the Allied forces. But now they had one. Was there some mistake in the dispatches? The king and the commander of the reinforcements were somewhat puzzled. They emerged from the hall and walked towards the fortress entrance. At that moment, Yi Qingtang led her troop of 10,000 soldiers back into the city. Chapter 16:16, Kingdom Protector 1. The king frowned slightly, and his suspicions deepened when he saw that the 10,000 soldiers were perfectly fine. What happened? Did they not leave the fortress to fight the war? The king asked in a deep voice. The soldiers beside him were dumbfounded for a moment and replied immediately. The Allied forces were defeated, so they returned. Strange. They clearly won, yet why does His Majesty have such a weird expression? But was there any way for the king to not have a strange expression? They only sent 10,000 people to fight the war and even appointed Yi Qingtang, who had no experience, to lead the troops. No matter what angle this incident was perceived from, it was a hopeless situation given that the Allied forces had 500,000 soldiers. But a few soldiers came to report their victory. How could they have one? How could they possibly have one? Tang, the king called immediately when he noticed Yi Qingtang in the crowd. Yi Qingtang took a step forward and bowed to the king. Your Majesty. You won. The king asked. Yes. Enchanting nodded. Where are the allied forces? Enchanting nodded to the soldiers guarding at the city gates, and those soldiers immediately understood and opened the city gates. Seeing that the soldiers actually opened the fortress gates so easily during a war, the commander of the reinforcements had a serious expression and wanted to stop them, but it was already too late. As the fortress gates opened slowly, the boundless plain entered everyone's sight. There was no trace of the allied forces. The allied forces withdrew their troops. The commander of the reinforcements asked in confusion. Enchanting shook her head. They're right here. What? The commander was at a loss, and a look of dissatisfaction emerged in his eyes as he sized up the girl before him. Where did this brat come from to cause trouble here? Enchanting smiled without saying anything. Joseph and the other kingdom knights rushed down from the city wall onto the king, whom they kneeled to pay respects. Your Majesty, Tang, is saying the truth. The allied forces are right here. The king frowned slightly. There was not a single person outside the fortress. Where were the allied forces? Your Majesty, the 500,000 soldiers of the allied forces are burned into ashes and are blown everywhere. Joseph mustered his courage to report as he secretly took a look at Enchanting when he spoke. He prayed that Tang could forgive their past ignorance. As calm as the king was, he could not help but widen his eyes at this moment. Then, Joseph and the rest vividly reported to the king the entire process about how Enchanting killed 500,000 soldiers of the allied forces in a second by herself. The king's expression changed drastically, and he looked at Enchanting in astonishment in great contrast to his past half-hearted attitude. The commander of the reinforcements felt his eyes almost popping out. A single person annihilated 500,000 soldiers, including the glorious Lion Knight's trump card and numerous black witches. What kind of joke is this? The king and the others did not dare to believe it easily, but they had incredibly amusing expressions when they saw the ashes of the allied forces, which the soldiers brought back. 500,000 soldiers were really burned into a pile of ashes by Tang herself. Currently, the commander of the reinforcements no longer looked down on Enchanting. He swallowed his saliva secretly as he looked at the petite girl and mumbled. Your Majesty. Could it be that she is the kingdom protector we have been waiting for years? Chapter 16-17, Kingdom Protector. 2. The commander of the reinforcements spoke very softly so that only he and the king could hear. The king's expression changed. But before the king could take his next move, there was an uproar within the fortress. A group of prisoners of war from the allied forces suddenly escaped from the fortress prison and were in a battle with the Supreme League Kingdom soldiers in the fortress. The king's expression darkened immediately, and he ordered people to suppress them. There were only about 100 prisoners of war, and they were subdued very quickly and were brought to the king. Under intense interrogation, the prisoners of war who escaped finally revealed the truth. The allied forces planted spies in the kingdom's fortress and prepared to release all of them from the fortress prison when the 500,000 soldiers attacked, so as to coordinate a pincer attack and annihilate the entire Supreme League kingdom. These prisoners of war kneeling before the king were the first group of people who were released. Spies. The king's expression darkened to the extreme. Without any warning, he unsheathed the sword hung on the waist of the commander of reinforcements and chopped off the head of a prisoner. Send my orders down. Kill all the prisoners of war in the fortress. There was no emotion in the king's voice, but what he said sent chills down everyone's spine. After such a long war, there were thousands of prisoners of war from the allied forces, and they were all locked in the kingdom's fortress. It was a rule of this mainland to not kill any prisoners of war during a war. Your Majesty, less than 1% of those prisoners of war know about this information. Many of them are innocent, a high-ranking military officer said, as he could not bear to see such a sight. However, before he could finish his sentence, the sword in the king's hand slashed the officer's neck. Blood spouted everywhere like a fountain, and the military officers who still wanted to persuade the king immediately kept their mouths shut. Their king was never a compassionate ruler. He was a true cold-blooded emperor who resorted to any means in order to achieve his goal, and all lives were insignificant to him. Just like his ambition to annex the entire mainland. No one dared to question the king's orders anymore. Large groups of soldiers surged into the prison, and in no time, piercing shrieks echoed in the air. The smell of blood emanated from the prison, and it was so strong that it was nauseating. The cries of thousands of prisoners of war did not result in any sympathy nor remorse on the king's face. He simply tossed the sword to the commander of the reinforcements and turned to look at Enchanting. "Tang, follow me to the hall." Enchanting was emotionless as she looked at the king who killed thousands of people with just an order. Then, she moved her legs and headed to the main hall with the commander of the reinforcements. As the king looked at Enchanting in the hall, a smile suddenly appeared on his gloomy face. "Kingdom Protector, I've been waiting for you for a long time." The king did not care about the deaths of thousands of people and was more concerned about the Kingdom Protector. Among the various kingdoms, a powerful protector would always appear at a certain timing. It was said that those protectors were guided by the gods to protect the balance among the kingdoms. They possessed extraordinary abilities and were collectively called the Kingdom Protector. Chapter 16:18, Kingdom Protector. 3. Kingdom Protectors kept watch in many nations, but the Supreme League Kingdom's Kingdom Protector never appeared. This brought the king great anxiety, but fortunately, there had long been a rule that Kingdom Protectors were not allowed to participate in wars between nations. It was exactly for this reason that the Supreme League Kingdom could last this long against the Allied forces. Otherwise, they simply had no hope of winning if the Kingdom Protectors of other kingdoms joined the war. However, with the reminder from the commander, the king realized that their Kingdom Protector may very well have appeared. And she was standing right before them at this very instant. The king recalled Joseph's recount of how Enchanting fought the Allied forces and increasingly felt that Enchanting was the protector of the Supreme League Kingdom. There's no doubt. In the entire mainland, who else apart from a Kingdom Protector could eliminate 500,000 soldiers by herself? And more importantly, Kingdom Protectors will never abandon their kingdom. Your Majesty, I've made you wait for a long time. Enchanting naturally went along with the king's discourse. Enchanting did not know what exactly a Kingdom Protector was, but she clearly sensed the king's change in attitude. The smiling king before her was completely different from the cold-blooded ruler who ordered the deaths of thousands of people just a while ago. Nevertheless, while she did not know what a Kingdom Protector was, it seemed to be someone who protected this nation from its name, and this coincided with the mission the god of nature gave her. The king nodded in satisfaction. The commander of the reinforcements was astonished and delighted. The Supreme League Kingdom finally had their own Kingdom Protector. However, the commander of the reinforcements suddenly thought of something, and he looked at the king as though he wanted to say something. At the thought of the military officer who was beheaded for persuading the king, the commander eventually did not voice his worries. It was a good thing that Enchanting was the protector of the Supreme League Kingdom. However, according to the mainland's convention, Kingdom Protectors were not allowed to participate in wars unless the enemy country invaded the kingdom's capital. However, Enchanting killed 500,000 men of the Allied forces earlier on. If this news of this incident spread, yet another disaster would probably hit this mainland. The commander's worries were not unfounded. News of the annihilation of the Allied forces' 500,000 soldiers spread across the mainland very quickly. 500,000 elite forces were wiped out in less than half a day, and not a single corpse was left. This was definitely not achievable by normal military troops. Apart from the Kingdom Protector, who else could possess such formidable powers? Not long after Enchanting annihilated 500,000 soldiers, the king of the Monza Kingdom personally visited the Supreme League Kingdom's fortress. The Monza Kingdom possessed the greatest military strength on this mainland. In this war that almost enveloped the entire mainland, the Monza Kingdom maintained a neutral position from the start and never took part in it. The Supreme League Kingdom had the strongest military, but in terms of military strength, it was far behind that of the Monza Kingdom. The two kingdoms had always stayed in their own lane, and now that the Monza King personally came to the Supreme League Kingdom's fortress, it seemed that the matter was truly severe. Chapter 1619, Kingdom Protector. 4. The Supreme League King was emotionless as he watched the magnificently dressed Monza King walk in. On the other hand, the Monza King was full of smiles. "Old friend, I heard that the Supreme League Kingdom's protector appeared." The Monza King spoke to the point after exchanging a few polite remarks. Upon hearing that, the Supreme League King frowned discreetly, and his eyes swept past Enchanting. The Monza King sharply sensed the Supreme League King's line of sight and immediately looked at the petite girl in the main hall. "This is the Supreme League Kingdom's protector, right? She's actually so young. But it's truly impressive that she could completely wipe out 500,000 soldiers from the Allied forces at such an age." The Monza King did not conceal his praises for Enchanting and seemed to be very optimistic about her. The Supreme League King's expression was not too pleasant. "What are you here for today?" The Monza Kingdom had massive military strength, and even the past Supreme League King did not dare to offend him easily. "Old friend, you've been fighting the Allied forces for so long, and you should be short in military strength by now. I am here to gift you troops today." The Monza King smiled while speaking. "What do you mean?" The Monza King smiled as he blatantly glanced at Enchanting. "Old friend, it is a cause for celebration that you found the protector. However, it is against the mainland's convention for a kingdom protector to participate in the kingdom's warfare. Truthfully speaking, all the kingdoms are already aware that you sent a protector into the war. Those who were originally in a neutral position are very dissatisfied with you over it and are prepared to join the Allied forces to punish you." The Monza King paused for a moment before continuing. "I'm here today to make a deal with you. As long as you hand your kingdom protector to the Monza Kingdom, I will give you troops with thousands of soldiers. It should be sufficient for you to deal with the subsequent battles. Kingdom protectors are forbidden from participating in warfares from the start. Even if you keep her, there is not much use for your coming battles. Why don't you hand her over to the Monza Kingdom instead? We're just helping each other to get what we want. You get the troops, and I get the kingdom protector. Then, your Supreme League Kingdom no longer has a kingdom protector, and other kingdoms do not have proof to reprimand you for violating the convention. Isn't this a win-win?" The Monza Kingdom had massive military strength, but like the past Supreme League Kingdom, there was a problem that plagued all kings. They did not have a kingdom protector. This was a sore point for the Monza King. Thus, he hurriedly rushed over after knowing that a kingdom protector appeared in the Supreme League Kingdom and even went into the battlefield. A sinister look flashed across the Supreme League King's eyes. "You want to have our kingdom protector?" "That's right. If you feel that 1 million soldiers are not enough, I can give you 2 million. The Monza King simply dropped a shocking number. 2 million. You're really generous. The Supreme League Kingdom laughed. The Monza King's eyes glistened. "Since you think that it's appropriate, it'll be fixed then. From now on, you are the Monza Kingdom's protector." "You're wrong," said the Supreme League King before lifting his chin slightly and sneering. "Tang will always be the Supreme League Kingdom's protector. I am not interested in your troop of 2 million soldiers. You can leave." Chapter 1620, Mission Countdown, 1, WH. What? The Monza King did not expect his attractive conditions to be rejected. You don't agree. Are you aware that you will really violate the mainland convention if you continue keeping her here? I'm doing this for the good of both our kingdoms. Please leave immediately. The Supreme League King ordered him to leave. The Monza King's face darkened completely. He shot the Supreme League King a furious look and scoffed before leaving the hall with his men. Once the Monza King left, the Supreme League King's expression turned for the better, and he looked toward Enchanting. The mainland convention is always a cover for those cowards. How ridiculous is it to have a powerful protector and not send him or her to war because of a vague convention? Enchanting smiled gently. Over the past few days, the king frequently summoned her to discuss the situation of the current war, and Enchanting was very clear about the king's ambition of dominating the entire mainland. Restricting the Supreme League King with a mainland convention. What a joke. Would a person who dares to become enemies with the entire mainland be scared of such a lame thing? The king looked toward the sky outside the hall and placed his hands behind his back. Since a long time ago, I have already thought that I definitely would not care about the mainland convention if I have a kingdom protector. It's their idiocy and cowardice to not dare to let their kingdom protector participate in warfare. I will never be as incapable as them. Afterward, the king's eyes focused back on Enchanting. Tang, are you willing to forget about the mainland convention and make the Supreme League Kingdom the hegemon of this mainland with me? The king seemed to be inquiring, yet also testing, Enchanting. I am willing to serve you, your majesty. Enchanting bowed slowly. The Supreme League King was not a hero, but he was a formidable character in troubled times. And her mission was to assist this formidable character to become the ruler of this mainland. The king laughed. He was extremely satisfied with Enchanting's reply, and his trust in her increased a lot. Tang, are you confident you can deal with other protectors? Once Enchanting participated in a war, the mainland convention on the protector restriction would be violated. The Supreme League King was sure that other kingdoms would definitely not sit and wait for death. Other kingdom protectors would participate in the upcoming battles. Enchanting said, I will definitely present your majesty with the ruler position. The king was in a slight daze and subsequently laughed out. He felt assured after hearing Enchanting's declaration. The Supreme League King's prediction was not unfounded. The kingdoms were not foolish. The Supreme League Kingdom violated the mainland convention by sending a kingdom protector to participate in warfare. This was a clear challenge to the entire mainland. The Monza Kingdom, which was previously embarrassed by the Supreme League Kingdom, joined the Allied forces camp with its massive military force. The remaining few neutral kingdoms also joined in to punish the Supreme League Kingdom. Since the Supreme League Kingdom was the first to go against the mainland convention, the other kingdoms in the Allied forces did not hold back anymore and successively deployed their kingdom protectors to the front lines. They wanted to see how a kingdom protector of the Supreme League Kingdom could fight against so many kingdom protectors of theirs. The moment the kingdom protectors participated in the war, this conflict that spanned across the entire mainland had already developed in an uncontrollable direction. Chapter 1621, Mission Countdown, 2, Dark clouds gathered in the sky, and sand swept in along with the wind. The armies were like a strong tide that slowly advanced into the fortress of the Supreme League Kingdom. The galloping of horses and hurried footsteps caused tremors in the ground. At the sight of the escalating frenzy at the horizon, the defending guards at the top of the fortress wall were shocked. The bugle call rang suddenly, and a restless stir broke out inside the fortress. The Supreme League Kingdom's soldiers climbed to the city walls successively and were alarmed when they saw the boundless majestic troops. Those are the Allied forces. Joseph and the other kingdom knights had an unpleasant look when they saw the massive troops before them. What's happening? Have the Allied forces launched a total offensive? In the previous battle, the Allied forces mobilized 500,000 soldiers, which was already extremely frightening, but that did not hold a candle to the present situation. How many soldiers are there? 1 million. 2 million. Or, the king and Enchanting scaled the city walls as well, and the king narrowed his eyes as he looked at the densely packed Allied forces swarming in like a tide. Over 60 million or so. Enchanting gave an estimate after a glance. 60 million. The Kingdom Knight's eyes popped wide open in disbelief when they heard this unbelievable figure. Over 60 million. Were the Allied forces insane? This was a life and death struggle. The Supreme League Kingdom only had about 7 million soldiers in the prime of its military strength, and after all the battles it went through, it only had less than 3 million soldiers left. Yet now, they were about to be attacked by almost all the kingdoms on this entire mainland. Over 60 million people. Even if each person contributed a small effort, they had enough soldiers to destroy the entire fortress. A serious look emerged on the king's face, and a grim air hung in the entire fortress as anxiety overwhelmed them. Only Enchanting had a calm and indifferent look. 60 million people. Is this all the armies of the other kingdoms? It should be the majority of their forces, said the king. Apart from the garrison troops, all the kingdoms probably dispatched many soldiers, and it seemed that they intended to have a decisive battle. Enchanting nodded thoughtfully. She should be very close to completing her mission. Supreme League Kingdom, you openly violated the mainland convention and dispatched a kingdom protector to enter the battlefield without authorization. Today, you will pay a tragic price for your actions. Get your kingdom protector out here or else we will destroy your entire fortress immediately. An armored male suddenly moved to the front of the troops and shouted loudly on his suave horse. He was clearly several hundred meters away from the fortress, but his voice was sonorous like thunder that rumbled in their ears. That is the Glory Kingdom's protector. The Supreme League King recognized that male at once and narrowed his eyes. Previously, the 500,000 soldiers of the Allied forces that Enchanting annihilated were dispatched by the Glory Kingdom. As a Supreme League Kingdom protector, Enchanting participated in the battle and wiped out 500,000 soldiers of the Glory Kingdom. She violated the mainland convention first, and it was reasonable for the Glory Kingdom protector to join this war now. The pressure of 60 million soldiers was not a joking matter. The other party was forcing Enchanting to come out to face them, otherwise, the troops would launch an attack immediately. Chapter 1622, Mission Countdown, 3, Tang, the Kingdom Protector of the Glorious Kingdom is very formidable. It said that he can control the land and cause landslides and crack the ground with his bare hands. Are you confident that you can beat him? The Supreme League King did anticipate the enemies to send their kingdom protectors, but the one from the Glorious Kingdom was considered rather powerful out of all the kingdom protectors. Enchanting smiled briefly and gave the Supreme League King a comforting look. Don't worry, Your Majesty. Afterward, Enchanting leaped up and flew toward the battleground from the tall fortress. At this instant, everyone in the Supreme League Kingdom was overwhelmed with anxiety. Meanwhile, the Allied forces were calm. In reality, the Glorious Kingdom Protector was not the only Kingdom Protector who was dispatched. However, he had a famous teacher and could fight in the war while the other protectors were constrained by the mainland convention and could not strike directly. Nevertheless, in their opinion, the protector of the Supreme League Kingdom seemed very young and weak, so the Glorious Kingdom Protector himself seemed to be enough to deal with her. The Glory Kingdom Protector raised a brow in contempt as he looked at the girl who flew toward him. Are you the Supreme League Kingdom Protector? That's right, replied Enchanting. Ha! Great! You massacred 500,000 soldiers of the Glorious Kingdom. I will settle this score with you today. The glorious kingdom protector jumped down from his horse immediately and cracked his knuckles. Enchanting glanced at him plainly, making it seem as if she did not detect the intense murderous intent emitted by him. I will use my hands to crush every single bone on your body, bury you underground, and make you die a miserable death. The glorious kingdom protector had a look of malice. Without any warning, he lunged forward and swung his fists, which could crush a mountain, heavily toward Enchanting. With a loud bang, the glorious kingdom protector swung his fist toward Enchanting's shoulder. However, rather than piercing through Enchanting's flesh, his fist seemed to have hit an extremely sturdy block of diamond. Full of crap. After uttering a plain sentence, Enchanting used her hand as a knife and struck her opponent's nape in a flash. In an instant, the glorious kingdom protector felt as if his nape was struck by lightning as an excruciating burst of pain spread throughout his whole body, causing him to turn pale from the pain. His tall figure collapsed to the ground in a stiff manner as he twitched in pain. Crush my bones. Enchanting looked at the protector on the ground, and her lips gradually formed into a smile. She lifted her leg slowly before stepping on the protector's head and driving it right into the ground. In an instant, blood spouted everywhere, and the protector's head was crushed by Enchanting's step. Control the land. Enchanting definitely did not feel that this person had such an ability. Perhaps he did, but, in front of Enchanting, his skills were so weak that he did not even have the chance to display his unique abilities. Currently, Enchanting was only thinking of completing the mission as soon as possible and exchanging treasures using her points. Obviously, she did not have the time and mood to continue being entangled in this world. Retracting her blood-stained leg, Enchanting looked up at the Allied forces camp. Chapter 1623, Mission Countdown, 4. At this instant, both camps on the battlefield were dumbfounded by the scene before them. What is going on? The glorious kingdom protector died, just like that. How can this be? Even if the Allied forces took into account that Enchanting was not as weak as she appeared, she should not be strong to the extent that she could kill a kingdom protector with a strike and a kick, right? The Supreme League King's initial worries completely vanished upon witnessing the scene, and he looked at Enchanting with deep admiration. In the Allied forces, the Monza King witnessed Enchanting's formidable powers and felt his lips twitch. No wonder the Supreme League King was unwilling to exchange Enchanting regardless of the conditions. We can't go on like this. The Supreme League Kingdom initiated the war and violated the mainland convention. If we still insist on upholding the mainland convention and forbid the kingdom protectors from joining the war, who will stop the Supreme League Kingdom's ambitions? The Monza King suddenly spoke and persuaded the other kings in the Allied forces. Only kingdom protectors could contend with a kingdom protector. Although they brought over 60 million soldiers, they would still suffer great losses even if they managed to conquer the Supreme League Kingdom fortress should they not eliminate Enchanting first. The various kings who initially took into account the mainland convention were completely wavering after witnessing how Enchanting killed the glorious kingdom protector in a second. Then, all of them made the decision to dispatch all the kingdom protectors in the troops. In no time, dozens of kingdom protectors appeared on the battlefield uniformly. How shameless are the Allied forces? They actually sent so many kingdom protectors? What do they want? Bullying us by outnumbering us. The Supreme League Kingdom Knights were infuriated. No matter how powerful Enchanting was, she was no opponent for the unified attack of this many kingdom protectors. Emotions of anxiety and worry instantly rose again in everyone. Your Majesty, I am willing to fight the war with Lord Protector. Joseph, who was previously annoyed with Enchanting, had already become the biggest worshipper of Enchanting now. Your Majesty, let us fight the war. The king's brows were locked tightly, and he had a serious look on his face. Seeing that the king did not reply, Joseph and the rest ran down by themselves and opened the fortress gates, wanting to fight the enemy with their powerful Lord Protector. However, just as the door opened, Enchanting heard a sound and stirred up a strong blast of wind with her palm, closing the fortress gates tightly. "Stay in there obediently," Enchanting said. She was going to complete her mission very soon. Why were they still rushing out to give her more trouble? Enchanting did not speak much, but Joseph and the rest were unaware of her feelings. They were under the misunderstanding that she did not allow them to join the battle because she sensed danger, and this assumption made them moved and anxious instantly. The numerous kingdom protectors were from different kingdoms and were extremely powerful. At this instant, they encircled Enchanting and were ready to get rid of this girl who violated the mainland convention. Enchanting glanced at all the kingdom protectors individually. "All of you can come on together." She did not wish to waste time. Chapter 1624, Mission Countdown 5. Enchanting's words left all kingdom protectors stunned. The allied forces thought that she was insane while the Supreme League Kingdom people were dumbfounded. Does Tang know what she is saying? Those kingdom protectors exchanged a look, and they caught sarcasm and ridicule in each other's eyes. Never had they seen such a shameless person before. Did she think she was a god just because she won against a kingdom protector? However, they would not go easy on Enchanting right now. As long as Enchanting died, the Supreme League Kingdom definitely would be unable to defend against the Allied forces' troops, and they would attain the final victory. Almost in an instant, the kingdom protectors surrounding Enchanting began to take action. Light glowed around them, and a powerful aura swept across the entire place like a strong torrent. Everyone in the fortress could sense the immense power and was extremely worried for Enchanting, who faced her opponents alone. Too careless. How can Tang be so arrogant? No matter how powerful she is, it's impossible for her to be the opponent of so many kingdom protectors combined. The soldiers of the allied forces were all smiling. They were waiting. They were waiting for the moment when Enchanting died. Enchanting showed no fear as she looked at the kingdom protectors around her displaying their remarkable powers. She glanced at them from the corner of her eyes slowly and sighed softly. If this is the extent of these kingdom protectors, that's really... In a moment, the kingdom protectors attacked Enchanting at the same time, and a blinding light enveloped the land instantly. An explosive sound pierced everyone's ears. Due to the bright light, no one could see where Enchanting was, and they could only strive to open their eyes and attempt to look for a trace of her shadow. Just as everyone thought that Enchanting would definitely die, a slender figure suddenly leaped out from the bright light. Those kingdom protectors thought that Enchanting had already died from the joint attack when they suddenly felt a powerful aura above their heads. They looked up instinctively, only to see Enchanting floating in the sky and towering over them emotionlessly. In the next second, Enchanting moved her leg in the air slightly. It was a slow and elegant move, but the moment her leg landed, black flames suddenly appeared from beneath her foot. The black flames spread in the surroundings wildly and flooded down to the ground like huge splattering waves. In no time, those aggressive kingdom protectors were completely engulfed by the endless black flames. The light glowing on their bodies gradually vanished from the black flames. Miserable shrieks escaped their mouths continuously as their figures were swallowed by the black flames bit by bit before everyone's eyes. As if they had fallen into a vast ocean with no way of breaking free, they had no room to resist. The scene left everyone utterly dumbfounded. They felt their hair stand as they watched numerous kingdom protectors, the symbol of the greatest power of a kingdom, being engulfed by the black flames and heard their plaintive cries. Chapter 1625, Mission Countdown 6. The black flames burned like the fires of hell, incinerating everyone they came into contact with. The desolate whales were broken up by the wind and gradually disappeared in the flames. The complacent allied troops were now ashen. These dozen kingdom protectors were gathered from various kingdoms. They were incredibly powerful. But now, these kingdom protectors had been reduced to ashes before their eyes. By the time Enchanting lifted her hand to absorb the black flames, there were only a dozen piles of smoking ash at her feet. The allied forces were stupefied. The group from the Supreme League Kingdom who had witnessed the whole process from the top of the fortress was also astounded. They would never have believed it if they had not seen it for themselves. Who on earth could kill a dozen kingdom protectors in a few seconds? Only then did the Supreme League King realize that Enchanting's earlier words were no exaggeration. She said that she would help him become the hegemon of this mainland. At that moment, the king also fully realized that she was the only person in the world who had such terrifying powers. Cheers rang out in the Supreme League Kingdom's fortress. Their kingdom protector was the most powerful one. She was more intrepid than the kingdom protectors in any of the other kingdoms. With such a powerful kingdom protector, what did their Supreme League Kingdom have to fear? There was rejoicing throughout the Supreme League Kingdom. Meanwhile, the allied forces were greatly alarmed. This was a completely unexpected outcome. They had been supremely self-confident when they set out, but now, they were filled with despair. What kind of demon was the Supreme League Kingdom Protector? They were all kingdom protectors, yet why was she so terrifyingly powerful? But before the allied forces could recover from their fright, the cheering Supreme League Kingdom soldiers impatiently opened the fortress gate and swarmed out. At that moment, all of them were burning with the desire to fight. Even if they had to face millions of enemies, they felt no fear. Because they had the most powerful kingdom protector on this mainland. She could single-handedly exterminate 100,000 men. She could kill a dozen kingdom protectors. She was Enchanting. Millions of Supreme League Kingdom soldiers swarmed out of the fortress. They deliberately stood behind Enchanting as if she was the true, indomitable force behind the throne. Enchanting had utterly terrified the allied forces. As the allied forces faced this army that was several times smaller than theirs, terror rose in their bones. So what if they had fewer soldiers? As long as the Supreme League Kingdom had Enchanting, it was enough to terrorize them. The leaders of the allied forces almost simultaneously ordered the retreat to be sounded. What kind of joke was this? Even the kingdom protectors were no match for this monster. They would only die at her hands. The 60 million strong army retreated without fighting. They fled in confusion like dogs that had lost their master. This day completely altered the situation on the entire mainland. In a single day, the allied forces had lost a dozen kingdom protectors. This terrified them more than losing 10 million troops. Enchanting, who had won a great victory, seized the opportunity to pursue them. Step by step, she pushed the Supreme League Kingdom to the highest position within the mainland. Chapter 1626, Mission Countdown 7. The Supreme League Kingdom had fewer soldiers, but they had Enchanting and could defeat the army's most powerful protectors. Under Enchanting's leadership, the Supreme League Kingdom army easily swept aside all resistance and destroyed one allied army camp after another. Wherever they went, the allied forces would flee in disarray. Their only wish was that they were born with a few more legs. As the allied troops were routed, the Supreme League Kingdom's power grew. Utterly terrified, the countries could not consolidate their strength. All of them sought to preserve themselves, so the alliance died in all but name. The Supreme League King advanced towards his goal of uniting this mainland. As they won again and again, the king's cruel and domineering side became increasingly apparent. Each time they captured a kingdom's capital, the king would order everyone in the kingdom to be killed. It was a massacre. Not a single soul was left alive, be it nobles or commoners. Enchanting was cultivating in her room when there was a sudden knocking on her door. She arose to open the door and saw Joseph standing outside. Joseph and the others had idolized Enchanting ever since she beat the dozen kingdom protectors. The kingdom knights, who had despised Enchanting, now became her fans. At that moment, Joseph's expression was extremely ugly. He was also dead white. "Lord Protector, please," pleaded His Majesty. Joseph suddenly kneeled before Enchanting. His voice shook. "What's going on?" Enchanting sensed that something was amiss with Joseph. Joseph raised his head. His bloodshot eyes were filled with helplessness and despair. "His Majesty has ordered us to slaughter everyone in the Hughes kingdom, even the commoners." When General Ronald tried to dissuade His Majesty had them beheaded. "Lord Protector, I know that the Hughes kingdom betrayed our Supreme League kingdom, but the commoners are innocent. The Hughes kingdom was originally allied with the Supreme League kingdom, but when the Supreme League kingdom began to struggle, the Hughes kingdom chose to throw their lot in with the alliance. They even sold their kingdom protector to the Monza king for 2 million soldiers. Because of that, the Supreme League king decided to carry out this shocking act of tyranny when he conquered the Hughes kingdom." Enchanting frowned slightly. She was only involved in the fighting and seldom interfered with the affairs of the Supreme League kingdom. However, she did not expect the Supreme League king to give such a sadistic order. It was the King of Hughes who had betrayed the Supreme League kingdom. What did it have to do with the commoners who were just getting on with their lives? Enchanting did not speak, but she brushed past Joseph and hurried to the Great Hall. When Joseph saw Enchanting heading for the Great Hall, a ray of hope rose in his heart, and he hurriedly followed. At that moment, the Great Hall was filled with the strong scent of blood. The Supreme League king had just cut off the heads of General Ronald and the others who had tried to stop the massacre. The floor of the Great Hall was sticky with blood. Everyone was ashen, and their hands shook as they tried to wipe the bloodstains away. The king on his throne showed no sign of pity. The Great Hall was flanked by 2 ministers, who were pale and unnerved. They did not dare to say a word. Amidst this dead silence, Enchanting strode through the entrance. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.